In the quiet suburbs of Magnolia Creek, Texas, one family's name would come to symbolize both the darkness of violence and the light of forgiveness. What began as an ordinary evening would end in tragedy. A mother and son murdered, a family destroyed, and a father forced to live with the unbearable truth that the killer was his own child. But this story doesn't end in vengeance. It ends in something few could ever imagine. Mercy. If you believe stories like this can open hearts, challenge justice, and remind the world that compassion still exists, please take a moment before we begin. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more true stories that reveal the power of redemption. Because sometimes, the most shocking part of a crime story isn't the crime itself, it's the forgiveness that follows. Let's get into the story. The small town of Magnolia Creek, Texas watched in stunned silence when the unthinkable happened. What had seemed like an ordinary evening would turn into a blood-soaked nightmare, and later, a moral reckoning that defied expectations of vengeance. Shadows on an ordinary night. Kent Harrington was a quiet, steady man in his mid-40s. He worked as a pipeline technician, came home nightly to his devoted wife Lisa and two sons, Bart, age 19, and younger brother Samuel, 12. On the surface, they were a typical family in a modest suburban home, dinner around a worn oak table, weekend fishing by the creek, chores on Saturdays, whispered bedtime prayers.
But in Bart's eyes, a storm was brewing beneath the surface. Over months, neighbours had glimpsed him grow more distant, more volatile. He'd dropped out of community college after one semester. He'd stayed in his room for long hours. Lisa tried to coax him out. Kent had sought counselling. Friends had offered help. But Bart seemed trapped in a silence that nobody could breach. On a late July evening, the family gathered for what would be their final dinner together. Kent remembers the scent of grilled chicken and corn, the hush of cicadas outside, the quiet tension in Bart's eyes. They joked about the dog digging holes in the yard. After dinner, Lisa excused herself to take a phone call. Bart stayed behind in the dining room. Samuel went upstairs to fetch a flashlight for a yard repair. Moments later, Kent heard a thunderous crack and a scream. He ran through the hallway to the bedroom and froze. Bart stood in the doorway, a shotgun in trembling hands. Lisa lay on the floor, blood pooling on the carpet. Samuel crouched nearer the hall entrance, clutching his chest. Kent's legs went weak, heart pounding. His son had turned on the family. In that frozen moment, neither father nor son acted. Bart looked at Kent, eyes wild with shock. As though his own actions had stunned him, Kent stood rigid, voice lost in his throat. Lisa's eyes fluttered, her lips dry. "Bart, don't," she whispered. Samuel gasped. Then Bart fired again. The bullet struck the wall near Kent, ricocheted, and grazed one of the chairs. Kent instinctively lunged but fell, knocked off balance. By the time the local sheriff arrived, the damage was done. Lisa was dead. Samuel was dying. Bart was subdued in the yard. Kent cradled his younger boy in his arms, tears mixing with blood on Samuel's shirt. The ambulances came, but it was too late. Samuel died en route to the hospital.
Bart sat shackled, dazed. The entire tight-knit community, which had always seen Kent as a reliable, gentle man, reeled in horror. The headlines screamed, "Son slays family. Father speaks only one word. Why?" Arrest, trial, and a town's demand for justice. Bart Harrington was quickly indicted on charges of triple homicide. The prosecutor's case was devastating in its clarity. Ballistic evidence, blood spatter, witnesses, and Bart's own presence at the scene.
He offered no coherent motive in court, and his lawyer argued severe mental distress. But the jury convicted him on all counts. As the media ran the story non-stop, Kent Harrington became an unwilling public figure. TV reporters camped outside his driveway. The neighbours either avoided him or expressed hateful stares. In the courthouse and local cafes, voices whispered, "He must pay with his life." Many said the only just outcome was capital punishment. Kent watched every step of the legal process in numbed anguish. He sat in the gallery at each hearing, tear-streaked and silent. He was not the type to speak to the press, but reporters visited him. "Do you believe in the death penalty? Will you ask for clemency?" His heart shattered each time. Samuel and Lisa were gone. Bart was slated for execution. By Texas law, Bart's execution date was set for a spring evening 5 years later. The state's machinery marched toward retribution. Kent's prayers turned bitter. He asked God how he could reconcile love with his grief. His faith wavered, but a seed of something unexpected began to grow in his heart. Mercy. The eve of execution, a father's radical plea. On the evening before Bart's scheduled execution, Kent requested to make a public statement. The media frenzy paused in anticipation. In the state capitol courtyard, Kent stood before a sea of cameras, reporters, flags, and grim-faced officials. When he spoke, his voice trembled, but his words were clear, powerful, and disarming. "I did not raise a monster," he said. "I raised a boy who lost his way. He took my wife. He took my son. He nearly took me. And yet tonight, I stand here to ask you, don't take him too." His voice cracked. "If you execute my son, the state will victimize him. Again, justice must be tempered with mercy." He paused, tears glistening. "I forgive him. I plead for clemency. Let his life be spared." Often, such statements are dismissed as spectacle, but Kent's words carried the weight of grief, dignity, and a rare moral conviction. He repeated, "Kill Bart, and you kill me again." He asked the governor directly to commute the sentence to life in prison. The world watched in stunned silence. His forgiveness shocked the public. Newspapers ran the headline, "Father forgives son, pleads for mercy." Some saw it as a weakness, others as a profound strength. The community was divided, vengeance or compassion. But Kent's voice had offered a new path, the last-minute reversal. In the hours before midnight, the governor's office convened. Legal appeals were nearly exhausted, but Kent's statement, combined with mounting public pressure and legal irregularities in the trial, errors in jury instructions, suppressed psychiatric testimony, gave officials pause. At 11:47 p.m., the governor's office announced a commutation. Bart's death sentence was replaced by life imprisonment without parole. The execution would not proceed. The shockwaves were immediate. Bart's cellmate later recalled the moment the news arrived. Bart, shackled, collapsed into sobs when he heard, "Life, not death." The prison guards, unaccustomed to such scenes, backed away respectfully. Kent wept openly outside the prison gates, trembling in anguish and relief. The reversal did not erase the trauma, but it changed Bart's fate and Kent's moral burden forever. The long road to redemption.
In the days that followed, Kent insisted on visiting his son. At the prison visitation centre, he took Bart's hand through the glass partition. Bart's eyes were hollow, haunted by remorse. Kent said no words the first day. He simply touched his face against the glass. Weeks later, Bart scribbled a letter. "Dad, I am so sorry. I can't undo any of it." Kent replied, "I forgive you, but I will not forget. You must live your life in service and humility. The town of Magnolia Creek would never be the same. Some neighbours refused to speak to Kent again. Others, moved by his courage, sent heartfelt notes. Theology seminars debated his act. The media revisited the story, not as a crime report, but as a human drama about mercy. Kent filed a civil lawsuit for emotional damages, citing the traumatic ordeal of being treated like a murderer, losing his reputation, enduring decades of distress. He never expected large compensation. He sought acknowledgement of the wrong done to him. Meanwhile, Bart adjusted to life behind bars. He volunteered in the prison's rehabilitation programs, reading with illiterate inmates, participating in therapy, and eventually earning a reputation as a model prisoner. Kent attended his parole hearings, though Bart remained ineligible, and spoke of his son not as a killer, but as a broken man who still needed redemption. Over time, friendships with religious leaders, grief counsellors, and local advocates formed around Kent and Bart's story. Their journey became a case study in moral forgiveness. Documentaries and books featured the Harringtons' unusual path: murder, murder, and an offer of life instead of death. Epilogue. When mercy outlasts vengeance. Years later, Kent turned to his remaining years with a quiet mission: speaking to prison audiences, advocating restorative justice, and supporting victims' families. He offered his story not as a blueprint, but as a question. Is there a justice greater than retribution?
Bart remained incarcerated, serving life, but his existence no longer boiled in bitterness. He wrote letters to Kent about small changes, learning carpentry, mentoring younger inmates, reconnecting with faith. In his own way, Bart tried to atone. Kent, now older and slowing with age, still visits the tiny graves of Lisa and Samuel. He whispers a prayer, then carries on. Each month he sends his son books and handwritten letters of encouragement. He sometimes speaks at prisons or at victim services conferences, always returning to that same refrain: forgiveness does not erase the crime, but it beckons us to something greater than vengeance. In Magnolia Creek, the memory of the murder remains, but so does the memory of the father who chose mercy in the shadow of unimaginable pain. Authorities later adopted procedural reforms in jury instructions, mental health assessments, and appeals procedures partly inspired by this case, ensuring that fewer lives fall victim to systems too eager for finality. Kent's decision to spare his son's life remains controversial, even today. But in his heart, he believed vengeance would only perpetuate violence. With that act of public forgiveness, he sought to redeem what was broken in both of them. In that place between death and healing, he wagered that mercy might be stronger than wrath, and in the silence that followed, the question remained: when can compassion surpass justice? And when does forgiveness become its own form of redemption? In the end, Kent Harrington lost everything: his wife, his youngest son, and the life he once knew. But in forgiving his eldest child, he found something the law could never give him: peace. Bart lives behind bars today, serving life for his crimes. Kent still visits him, not out of duty, but out of love. A love that refuses to let hatred have the final word.
Their story remains one of the most extraordinary acts of forgiveness ever witnessed. A father's choice to meet horror with humanity and to prove that even in the darkest places, compassion can still win.
If this story moved you, tap the like button, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe for more true stories of justice and redemption. Because every time you share a story like this, you help remind the world that forgiveness is not weakness. It's the strongest thing a human heart can do.